The theory of evolution ultimately relies on a blind impersonal force as the process of the development of all things. Yet, order and design in the universe, DNA's storage, information and instructions, and the fact that life always comes from life seems to point to a divine designer. In this video, we're going to look at the amazing and complex protein called kinesin and see how this super information highway requires a divine mind. Let's kick things off by understanding the basics of kinesin. Now, kinesin is not a living thing, it's found within a living thing within a cell. It's essentially a protein, but it is basically like a microbiological courier, which moves things within a cell and sometimes can even move things across other cells. It plays a pivotal role in intracellular transportation and moves along microbiological roads known as microtubule filaments. Basically, it's a biological motor which is somewhat humanoid in appearance because it has two legs that walk along this road and two arms that carry the load to wherever it's desired. Let's watch this short clip to get a greater understanding of the amazing complexity of kinesin.
Electron microscopy is a technique for obtaining high-resolution images of biological specimens by using a beam of accelerated electrons as a source of illumination. And what's discovered inside the simplest of living things is astounding indeed. As PhD geneticist Michael Denton described, to grasp the reality of life as it has been revealed by molecular biology, we must magnify a cell 1,000 million times until it's 20 kilometers in diameter and resembles a giant airship large enough to cover a great city like London or New York. What we would then see would be an object of unparalleled complexity and adaptive design. On the surface of the cell, we would see millions of openings like the portholes of a vast spaceship, opening and closing to allow a continual stream of materials to flow in and out. If we were to enter one of these openings, we would find ourselves in a world of supreme technology and bewildering complexity.
I want you to note what Michael Denton said. If we were to enter one of these openings, we would find ourselves in a world of supreme technology and bewildering complexity. Now, just those words alone, it should make you think, oh wow, maybe there is a mind behind such an amazing thing as kinesin and within the cellular structure within which it operates. But a question we should ask is, why is kinesin like this? I mean, Charles Darwin had no idea about the complexity of cells. In fact, he even said himself, if it turns out that life is far more complex than he thought, he would have to abandon or at least seriously question his theory of evolution. And I'm pretty sure if Darwin was alive today, he would renounce the ridiculous idea of evolution. Now imagine in the future, let's say humans have mastered interstellar space travel, and there's a spaceship with astronauts, and they land on an unknown planet. And where they land, they see a biological dome 20 kilometers in diameter, which can cover the size of major cities such as London or New York. Now, they see all these portholes, and from the portholes, they see what look to be biological robots moving things through these portals. Now, what do you think the scientists, or the astronauts, I should say, probably scientists / astronauts would think? Do you think they would think, wow, such complexity and order and design, there must be an alien race behind it. There must be some kind of designer. Or would you think they would think, wow, what coincidence? Time and chance and natural selection and mutations somehow created all this amazing structures with complexity. Now, I think if you're being honest, it's more plausible to reach the conclusion that there was a mind behind the complex structures. Let's look at another clip about kinesin and its complexity.
Now, part of that bewildering complexity is our topic of conversation, kinesin. Kinesin proteins aren't living things. Rather, they're a family of miniature motor proteins inside living things that transport cargo around inside cells and are remarkably humanoid in appearance. Having two legs that allow them to walk along roadways inside cells and two arms that allow them to carry packages full of important cargo, they're like the postal delivery people, but on a mind-bogglingly microscopic scale. At only 7 billionths of a meter long, they consist of, utilize, and synchronize with an incredibly complex array of microbiotechnology that rivals the most sophisticated feats of engineering that humans have ever achieved.
Let's zoom in on what the host said about kinesin. They consist of, utilize with, and synchronize with an incredibly complex array of microbiotechnology that rivals the most sophisticated feats of engineering that humans have ever achieved. Let that sink in. We know that complex design and structures require a mind. It requires thoughts and planning, maybe even teams, working across the globe to create such amazing complexity and technological achievements. If we apply the same reasoning to kinesin and the structure of the cell, why is it suddenly implausible by many atheist evolutionists to suggest that there was a mind or designer behind it? It seems to be rather inconsistent, because I'm pretty sure on the one hand, they'd admit that factories require a mind to create all the interconnected systems, where in a factory something is ordered, there's a communication, the order is put into a database, the blueprint for a design or the order is made, then it's put into the production, and then when it's all finished off, then a courier is called to move that object, to send it to where it's meant to be. Or if it's not a courier, maybe some kind of line following robots or some system in the factory which can not only control and manage everything, but make sure it runs as efficiently and effectively as possible. So why do many atheists and evolutionists immediately dismiss any possibility that there is a mind behind the complexity we see, such as in DNA, such as in the human eye, and other biological systems? Now, just to clarify, kinesin and its complexity is not definitive proof that God created it. However, using abductive reasoning, which is we look at the result or the consequence, and then we try to figure out what caused it. In other words, so we're trying to find the antecedent. Using this abductive reasoning method, then it's quite plausible to reach a conclusion that God or a divine mind created kinesin and the structure of the cell. Now, I am not a philosopher. However, I have put together 7 premises that I think point to kinesin as being made by a mind. 1. Kinesin and the cellular structure in which it operates is extremely complex. 2. Kinesin is comparable in complexity to the most sophisticated feats of human engineering. 3. Sophisticated feats of human engineering necessarily require a mind capable of planning, creating, and organizing. 4. Kinesin is an extremely complex feat of engineering. 5. Therefore, we can attribute a mind to its complexity. 6. That mind is best explained by a non-human creator. And 7. In light of other philosophical arguments, such as, but not limited to, the Kalam cosmological argument, the fine-tuning argument, and the fact that life came from life, God is the most plausible creator. Premises 5 to 7 rule out a blind impersonal force such as evolution. I think most people would agree with the first 3 points. Perhaps some people may agree with point 4, but they may disagree that it has to be designed. It may be complex, but not designed. Now, point 5 I think it's also plausible because we see such complexity in life, in DNA and other biological systems. I think it is plausible that there is a mind behind such order, design, and complexity. Now, the sixth point, I think everybody would agree, it's best explained by a non-human creator. I mean, logically, humans can't be the cause of kinesin in the cells because it's within us. So I think everybody agrees with that. But the seventh point, the conclusion of the argument, that God is the most logical, or the most plausible cause, I think that's going to get the most kickback. But I think many atheist evolutionists will be just like, no, can't be God. Now, I don't think it's because they've actually deeply thought about the philosophical implications behind it. I think it's because they are committed, they have presuppositions, and anything that goes against their presuppositional worldview, therefore, has to be rejected. Romans 1:19-20 says, they know the truth about God because he has made it obvious to them. For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature. So they have no excuse for not knowing God. I think there's a lot of truth to this. I think that when atheists look at things around them, things we see in the world, like I'm looking at my phone, I'm looking at my laptop, there's a desk here, there's a microphone, there's clothes. We know that things that are made, even if we don't see them being made, when we see them, it's evidence that there was a creator because there's a creation. But why can't we take that same logic and apply it to the universe? Why is there an entire universe? What caused the Big Bang? Why or how did life begin? What caused life? What is the mechanism behind all the natural laws like mathematics, physics, gravity? It's just mind-bogglingly absurd to me that they just exist. It's more plausible that a mind created them and finely tuned the universe. So in looking at all of the evidence for a designer, it's plausible that there is a God. Now, going back to kinesin, there are actually different types of kinesin proteins, but they all essentially have the same role, which is to transport necessary goods within the cell. Let's look at another clip that goes into detail about this system.
Now, there are many different types of kinesin and kinesin-related proteins, each with different specifications and functions that have been discovered in various organisms from yeast to humans. But the following example is a very basic scientific description of what a typical kinesin does and why it does it. Inside life forms, proteins and other needed parts must be delivered to specific places within the cell at precise times. Now, if the needed part is a protein, for example, a manufacturing plant, called a ribosome, receives blueprints for the part from the nucleus. The information is stored in the nucleus on a strand of DNA, but the blueprint is sent in the form of an RNA copy of that section of the DNA. Now, this is obviously a complex coordinated effort, as something must first access the creature's DNA library, unzip it at the exact location needed to copy the specific information required for whatever part is to be manufactured, create a copy of the information for the part, and deliver it to the factory. Afterwards, another organelle in the cell, called the Golgi apparatus, packages the needed part and wraps it in a bag called a vesicle, then imprints the address where the part is to be delivered onto the outside of the parcel. Then a kinesin is summoned, and as mentioned, a typical kinesin has two arms on one end holding the cargo, the vesicle, and two legs on the other end that walk along the roadway called a microtubule. So it picks up the parcel and walks along microtubules in the cell and delivers the parcel where it's needed.
Now, what was just described is a complex microbiological factory. It is. Basically, somehow, in this tiny, tiny, minuscule cell, if something goes wrong, there has to be sensors to know if something is wrong. So it sounds like a program, right? There's a program in this. If something goes wrong in the cell, there has to be a system or a mechanism to know there's a problem. So there has to be some kind of a sensor. Then, once that problem has been detected, then it has to be dealt with. So it's extremely complex. How this can just happen naturally by chance, to me, it takes more faith to be an atheist in this particular case. So there's a problem. The cell somehow can detect there's a problem. Then the cell will then send instructions for a copy or a duplicate of the broken part to be made. And then when it's made, then it calls for the courier, so to speak. Kinesin. Kinesin will then go to collect and pick up this part which has been created. And essentially the GPS coordinates are punched into Kinesin, and it will take it exactly when and where it's needed. That is such complex system. It cries out for a mind, in this case, a divine designer. Now let's watch another short clip that gives us a modern day analogy of this biological system.
Now, if that sounded like a lot of technobabble to you, let's use a more relatable scenario that, although sophisticated, actually pales in comparison to what Kinesin regularly do, so that we can better understand the level of complexity at which these micro-machines interact and operate among the other systems inside cells. Now, imagine a fellow named Joe is working at his job one day when suddenly the machine he's operating breaks down. After doing a diagnostic to determine what happened, he identifies a broken part and makes a call from a cell phone to a local manufacturer in his contact list, requesting the needed component and giving them the part number. The manufacturer takes the order and records Joe's address. However, although they have a list of all the part numbers on hand, they don't have the schematic required to manufacture it. So they send an email to another company that has the copy of all the blueprints for every part needed in the industry, requesting the needed diagram. So someone there makes a photocopy of the needed section from the master database and delivers it back to the manufacturer. And now, having the instructions to construct Joe's needed part, the factory then constructs it, puts it in a package, marks it with the postal address from its database, and calls a courier company to send a delivery person. After arriving at the factory and acquiring the package, the courier punches in the GPS coordinates and travels along the route plotted to deliver the package to the proper address so that Joe can get on with his day. And voila, mission accomplished.
So think about it. This very powerful analogy of Kinesin and the cell, to a factory, a real life factory, which manufactures things. Now, everybody knows that in a factory, there's mind behind it. All the different departments, all the information, the database, everything in it. This system includes a very high degree of engineering and manufacturing aptitude, multi-tiered levels of communication, coordination, and interaction, databases that are accessed and the correct information is retrieved, integrated components, as well as specialized knowledge at each step in the process. Such closely coordinated resolution of complex issues rivals even the peak of human sophistication. Think about that. And yet, I'm pretty sure most of you watching, if you're atheists, will just automatically reject the idea that there is a mind behind it. Now, I think it's because of your presupposition more than that you're actually analyzing the data logically. Come on, be honest. Design and complexity cries out for a designer. If you don't think so, I would love to hear your sound reasoning why not. In fact, belief in evolution seems to naturally select an inconsistent worldview. Pun intended. As Paul says in Romans 1:22, claiming to be wise, they instead became utter fools. So, as we wrap up this video on the complexity of Kinesin, we know that it's an extremely complex system with many interrelated functions or departments working together towards a common goal. Kinesin is a molecular motor which is a marvel of biomechanical engineering. From its intricate structure to the precision of its movements, it cries out for a designer. Now that's it for this video. I hope you've learned something, and I hope you will consider the arguments put forward in this video. Now, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and comment on the video, like the video, and share the video. And remember, faith is not fairy tales, and God is real.